Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukraine, Russia, China show. Actually, we could add India too because I've just learned that India sent its contingent to the war games between Russia and Belarus. So Indian contingent participates in that. Bravo, bravo, bravo. And with that, I'd like to introduce, first of all, myself, Sasha Starstill, and Dr. Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
And our man in Kiev, Ivan Kucherenko. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Sasha. Hello, Jonathan. Hello to everyone. Glad
Ivan,
to be
have you
here
heard
today.
about this contingent from India participating in Russian Belarusian war games?
Yeah, it's terrible news actually. But before that, there were representatives of the United States and NATO countries as well to monitor those war games, those training, and it's unbelievable actually how it could be possible. Just imagine. That after annexation of Sudet region, Hitler initiates with Italia, with Benito Mussolini initiates war games and invites British representative of British or United States Army to be present there and to just to watch how powerful army they have and how they will how they plan to conquer all the world. It's
Well, the
it's
United States. I must point out the United States in the 1930s did have an officer, and that attended the German Kriegs Academy. He attended their war academy, and he learned all about their Blitzkrieg doctrine, and that came in very handy for him when he went back, and he eventually became a general officer. He was actually he was a major at the time. He rapidly rose to general officer when they discovered his knowledge, and he helped formulate the Allied victory plan for World War II. So you never know.
in this case, yeah,
It worked
it
out.
could be useful. Yeah.
In this case, I think the Indians are trying to. They are sending observers because they are sending observers really, and they're probably trying to learn as much as they can, because for India that could come in handy in the future for them if they ever had to defend themselves against China, which is after all they have had clashes with China in the past. So we can't read too much into it. It's not necessarily an expression of total solidarity, but it is interesting. I must admit, you are correct. It is quite an interesting development. And there are other interesting developments which have taken place, which we will get to. But first, Sasha, I'll hand the ball back to you to check with Ivan to see if we've got a new update from him.
Well, what about video? That's
Yeah, sure,
what we're looking at. Okay,
sure. I've got a new video, so we can watch it right now.
thank you.
Is a liar. He lied over Chechnya, over Georgia, over Syria, and the peace accords which were made after the annexation of Crimea. So he can't be relied upon. I wouldn't trust anything he said or signed up to. This is the front line for European and Western freedom. The consequences for the entire world, if Ukraine were to fail, would be absolutely catastrophic. It was pretty clear to me that it would be probably the toughest election I could fight. So I started to think, well, if the worst were to happen, I'd come to Ukraine. I'd spend, and almost immediately after that initial thought, I thought I'd end up serving in the military, I hoped. We have, what happened in the Second World War in 1940 in our DNA. It's within living memory, just when we were alone, fighting for our survival, for our existence as a nation. We were bombed, our cities were bombed. You have to learn the lessons from it. And the lessons are, appeasement doesn't work, invasions can't be negotiated away, and you have to deter and defeat dictators. Putin doesn't care about civilian casualties, he doesn't care about his own troops' casualties, he doesn't care about the cost to his people economically of this conflict. So I think he needs to see that Europe's united, the Americans are united, and he needs to think about bringing it to an end. I have a variety of focuses, a bit of diplomacy, foreign relations, procurement, from air defence, which we need a lot more of, to personal kit and equipment. And I'm doing some veterans work. Black and white. It's good against evil. It's as simple as it gets, really.
Outstanding video there, Ivan.
Great video. Yeah, agree.
A really great story when a British politician actually joins armed forces of Ukraine, International Legion, to support Ukrainian army, not just by words like a lot of politicians like to, but by the actual deeds. And it's a great respect for him and for others, men and women who are joining the International Legion of Ukraine from other countries, because they just cannot watch how good fights evil. Actually, what he said, because it's clear, quite clear in this war, what is good and what is evil.
Yeah, it's a lot clearer than it was, for example, in World War I. And in World War I, I would point out, both sides firmly believed that God was on their side, and that the other side represented the epitome of evil and had to be defeated at all costs, without restraint. And World War I, as you probably recall, was absolutely devastating in the ferocity and lack of restraint with which both sides attacked each other and were unwilling to bring it to a halt. And the result was the deaths of about 17 million. And that was just the opening act. World War II, as you know, proved to be even more devastating. But the lines between good and evil were much more clear then. And so this is. You're quite correct that I fully agree with the gentleman in that video that the European nations have learned the lessons of history. They have learned that aggressors such as Russia must be stopped right there. They cannot negotiate it away. They cannot bribe them. They cannot be bought off. They cannot be. They have to be defeated militarily on the battlefield, and then diplomacy can enter the picture when it has been backed up by a solid military victory. Then it's just taking care of the details of their defeat and getting them out of Ukraine. The interesting thing is that President Trump has finally, better late than never, I say, has identified Russia as the aggressor, unequivocally. And that is what is also interesting, and I need to follow up on this because there is not only a very important lesson, but a very real danger in what is now occurring. In that he is urging the nations of Europe to stop buying Russian oil. Okay, that's a very good move. Right now, China buys about half of Russia's oil exports. And the Europeans, if they were to stop buying Russian oil and instead buy it from the United States, which is, I think, what President Trump has in mind, it benefits him and it hurts Russia, and it also would severely cut into Russia's ability to continue financing its war effort. But here comes the danger. Remember during World War II, and we've discussed this before, when the United States in 1941 cut off oil exports and steel exports to Japan, and they cut it off to them, so they didn't have anything then. This put Japan in an intolerable position. They had two choices at that point. They could either accept it and surrender and basically not unleash their war of aggression, which to the Japanese mindset at that time was unthinkable. Surrender was not in their mindset. Or they could lash out with their military forces and attack Pearl Harbor and take their chances. And you know what happened there. Now we fast forward to the present. Remember my previous discussions about Russian discussions during the Cold War of what they called the crisis of capitalism. where they saw that they believed that as the socialist revolution continued to gain successes throughout the world, eventually the capitalists, and in particular the United States, would become so desperate that they would lash out with their nuclear arsenal in a desperate attempt to reverse the situation. That is why the Soviets at that time justified their doctrine of a nuclear war fighting, war survival, and war winning doctrine. They saw it as politically necessary for the Soviet Union to be able to fight, survive, and win a nuclear war with the United States. Not that they actually could at that time, but they believed that it was necessary to have that as a goal. Now, in my book, The Russian View of U.S. Strategy, I have very clearly documented how the Russians were basically mirror imaging. They were projecting their own thinking onto American planners and assuming that the Americans saw things the same way they did, that the United States was moving towards a nuclear warfighting doctrine. Now, here's the problem. Because the Russians clearly have this tendency to project their own logic onto American planners and onto the West, the danger is that that means they are thinking themselves, if they are in a desperate situation, they would be fully justified in lashing out with their nuclear arsenal, possibly tactical in Ukraine, in their war in Ukraine. Here's the danger. If the Russians are in fact pushed into a corner, pushed into a position of near certain defeat by severely cutting off their oil export income, they will be in a position. They're already moving towards military defeat. Their offensive is bogging down. The Ukrainians are successfully counterattacking. And if this trend is pushed further and the West unites against them, there is the danger that Russia will lash out. Sasha, comments?
Okay, question to you, Jonathan. Remember you were talking about restricting oil and gas sales from Russia to the West. Okay, let's go country by country. The Dutch is number 12 on the list. The France is number 13 on the list. We know China is number 1, but let's talk about number 4 on the list. And who do you think it is, Jonathan? Ivan?
No idea.
It is United States of America, number 4 on the list. So there's a gigantic hypocrisy on American demanding that they will stop. Europe will stop in 2027 buying any Russian products from natural resources. Anyway, they will by 2027. It's in plans. U.S. doesn't have plans to stop buying Russian oil and gas products, not in 27 or 28 or 35 or 55. So how dare United States can propose something unthinkable because they don't even have enough products to replace the Russian oil and gas. They even don't. Furthermore, there is another stupidity is that the deal with European Union calls for 5 years, $750 billion worth of buying of U.S. natural resources, so gas and oil, by European Union. It means 250 billions a year, if I'm correct. How much European Union purchased in last year of oil and gas products? 85 billions. So how United States is planning to sell Europeans $250 billion worth of products when all last year they purchased only 85 billion. Jonathan, any considerations about that?
It will be interesting to see how the United States plans to carry this out, because they can always change their sales, but their policies. And I would say I'm going on the stated declarations, and if the United States in fact succeeds in doing what it says it plans to do, then there is a very hidden danger if they can push the Russians even further towards a military defeat. Now, what you have asserted is very interesting, and I would be very curious to see the sources of that assertion and the documentation, of course. But in the meantime, I would say that right now there is a very serious danger. Russia is still sliding towards military defeat and stalemate in its war in Ukraine. And what I'm pointing out is that we must be very careful in that if we in fact succeed in producing the desired amount of leverage or the desired amount of damage to the Russian war economy, that there is the danger of Russia lashing out in desperation.
Okay. Obviously, I will produce to you the list of all countries and quantity, how much they're buying Russian oil or oil products, gas, and so on. That's information easily available. I've heard it actually many times by now. So therefore, I was not inclined to look at the actual sources, but you're absolutely right. Why not to look? It's quite educational. It's quite interesting, and we'll find out because the U.S. is doing a lot of strange things which affect Ukraine and the rest of the world. For example, this South Korean plant, the battery plant, where the United States shackled well over 300 South Korean specialists, and they deported them back home in shackles. And Prime Minister of South Korea, which signed a deal with Trump about $1.5 trillion investments in the United States. And after this episode, he said no more any investments to the United States. So the United States, which has $37+ trillion in debts, and here comes easy $1.5 trillion of South Korean investment, and United States shackles South Korean specialists and deports them. Jonathan, any comments on that?
Yeah, we don't know what the United States and ICE knows about those particular workers, so we don't have complete information. I would say withhold judgment on that.
Okay, so probably some of them had incomplete papers, maybe some other things. Is it worth $1.5 trillion investment to put them in shackles? I don't know. And that's not a single case. Same thing has happened with Denmark. Denmark is turning down all previous pledge of investments to the United States. And list goes on and on and on. And of course, that affects in decisions or quite, how to put it mildly, incorrect decisions about participation of the United States in Ukrainian affairs. So by now, obviously, from my perspective, all peace talks are done and over with. So now it's a war. It's whoever wins the front lines affairs, that is going to be a winner. Why is it not in the West, and particularly the United States, interest to get Ukraine winner? The fear of nuclear retaliation, is that the case, Jonathan?
That would appear to be the only realistic fear or concern that the United States might have. It would be nuclear escalation. That is, in fact, what Russia has been counting on during this entire Ukrainian war, because they have been, as you note, they have been, ever since the start of the war, really, Russia has been brandishing its nuclear arsenal, relying upon the Western fear of nuclear escalation to give it a cover for its aggressive war against Ukraine. However, in typical Western fashion, and particularly the United States, the West has been moving towards attempting to negate as much as possible. For example, the declaration of the Golden Dome project. They can't just call it up out of existence out of nowhere, but they can move in that direction by showing willingness to build up its strategic nuclear defenses, and potentially, based upon the Golden Dome bill and provisions in it, they are certainly studying space-based interceptors. And we've discussed the possibility of how that might be executed in previous things, and the potential of overlooking certain hidden flaws in the Golden Dome concept. But nevertheless, the West is, however slowly or in a disorganized fashion, moving towards trying to negate that fear of nuclear escalation. And there is also, as you and I have also discussed, the possibility that the Russian nuclear arsenal may be so corrupt or so corrupted with the potential of corruption in their logistics system that it is unrealistic to assume that just because the Russian logistics have a great deal of corruption in their supply system, that somehow the nuclear arsenal is magically immune to the same sort of corruption. So it may be that Russia is running a bluff.
I think it's not only about this, about some kind of nuclear retaliation or nuclear strike from Russia, but it's more about the same reason why United States didn't want Soviet Union to collapse, because the defeat of Russia in this war, and if Ukraine straightly win this war, will means, and it was analyzed by different think tanks, by Ukrainian intelligence, by United States intelligence, that it will lead to catastrophic internal processes in Russia and a collapse of Russia, which obviously will lead that a lot of different countries, maybe some criminal gangs and some military forces will appear on the remnants of Russia, and they will have nuclear weapons. They will have Russian nuclear arsenal. It's about this. It's the same reason why that famous Chicken Kyiv speech of George Bush was taking place in Kyiv, when he begged the government of the Ukrainian Soviet Republic not to leave the Soviet Union, not to declare independence, because the United States at that moment didn't want Soviet Union to stop existence, because of that fear that it's unpredictable what countries will appear on the remnants of the Soviet Union, what nuclear arsenal they will have. And after that, actually, Soviet Union collapsed within several weeks after that famous speech.
By the way, George...
And the deal with nuclear weapons actually was also a pretty easy task, because Ukraine easily gave up their nuclear arsenal by signing the Budapest Memorandum, and it was okay, because the exchange was pretty fair. Ukraine gives, if Ukraine didn't give their nuclear arsenals, there are probably some sanctions from the United States, not economical support, and all those new countries which will appear on the remnants of Russia, they actually will require it as well, to lower the number of reparations which they will have to pay to Ukraine, for instance, some economical support from the United States. It's negotiable, so the United States will be able to get their nuclear weapons and give something in exchange for them.
With all due respect, Ukrainians not so easily gave up their nuclear devices.
Yeah,
Belarus, they done it almost an hour and a half. Done deal. Ukraine wouldn't, first of all, they had third largest in the world nuclear arsenal. Also, they have missiles. They have very sophisticated ways of maintaining this arsenal, or so on. And it's only involvement US and UK and signing of the Budapest Memorandum led to what actually happened. Unfortunately, Ukrainian diplomacy were not sophisticated enough to understand that memorandum means nothing. It's not a treaty. It's not a contract. It's we agree to do so and such thing. That's what they signed. But unfortunately, it
But
was
it didn't have any real binding force. You're quite correct.
exactly.
Ukraine actually had to hire some good American lawyers or
Yeah.
British for
Yeah, you
preparing
see how
that.
much good it did them. Gee.
Yeah.
Well, they could pay up with a few nuclear devices for legal help, I
Yeah,
guess.
sell them on the black market. They would probably fetch a very pretty price.
Actually,
Uh,
in
and
monetary
that
terms, I'm not.
that's what United States is afraid of, that all those nuclear weapons which are now in Russia, and which those new countries, Russian regions, will acquire in case of Russian collapse, that they will go to black market, and probably
Yeah.
some terroristic organizations can get them. But I think it's
Yeah.
it's bullshit, because in those Russian regions, subjects, there are local elites actually which rule them, and they will require much more support from the Western countries, for the United States, in order to survive. Actually, then they will get more from trading those nuclear arsenals to the Western countries than from selling them on the black market, because selling them on the black market is a 1 minute deal, but it will not allow you to survive if you have no money to support your economy. Actually, do you remember how United States actually helped Russia to feed Russian people? They were
Yes.
sending those chicken legs, which in Russia, in Ukraine, and in post-Soviet countries, they were named bush legs. Bush legs, and they actually sent those chicken legs to help feed people, because there were no products at all. Economy collapsed at the moment. I think that that's the real scenario of the end of Russia, actually, that Russian economy. And before that, in 3 weeks or 3 months, I don't remember, George Bush went to Kiev and hold those famous Chicken Kiev speech. And then Russian economy, Soviet Union economy collapsed in very short period, and the United States have to send the chicken legs to feed Russian people. We don't know actually the state of Russian economy right now, but the signals
The
there
most
are
interesting
pretty
thing
interesting.
story is that the Bush senior was the first one to find out in the world, even before Gorbachev, to find out about the dissolution of the Soviet Union. President Kravchuk phoned Bush and told him. Shushkevich phoned Gorbachev. But prior to that, Gorbachev was number 2. Number 1 was Bush, and Kravchuk was the first one who phoned him. And Gorbachev was upset that he was only the second one who found out about it.
Well, keep in mind that Bush had previously been the director of Central Intelligence, and he had access to CIA reports. And when I was in graduate school, and we were studying the Soviet Union and Soviet economy, we were given a CIA report, an open source CIA report that was published, where the CIA was projecting, and this was in, 1978. And we were looking at this report, and the published report analyzed the Soviet economy using the information that was provided in open sources by the Soviets themselves. But the CIA projected that by 1985, that the Soviet economy would reach the breaking point, that it could not sustain its economic development or growth at that point, and it would reach a crisis point. And interestingly enough, at that same time, sure enough, in 1985, the Gorbachev, according to the book KGB, The Inside Story by Christopher Andrew and Oleg Gordievsky, is that Gorbachev received a report from the KGB analyzing the Star Wars program, the Strategic Defense Initiative. And in that report, the KGB essentially told Gorbachev that eventually the US SDI program would eventually be able to block 90% of Soviet missiles in a first strike, and that there was no way that the Soviet Union could keep up with this capability. And you also notice that soon after Gorbachev got that report, he was desperately trying to convince President Reagan to give up SDI in exchange for massive arms cuts, and Reagan refused to do it. So all this fascinating dynamic is that just simply goes to show that the developments, the political developments, especially economic developments, can have a very decisive effect on the actions, foreign policy actions of major antagonists. So right now it is a very open question. Again, the whole key comes back to military victory on the battlefield. The Russians cannot achieve it. The Ukrainians are showing increasingly that they have the ability to not only stop the Russian offensive, but given the proper circumstances and the right amount of aid and at the proper time, that the Ukrainians will be able to inflict a decisive counteroffensive. And I'm still arguing for Crimea, for cutting off the Crimea. But regardless, they are steadily making inroads into what previously the Russians had been able to gain in their previous offensives. So right now it is military victory, I would argue, is still within reach for Ukraine. And it becomes a matter of time as to whether the Ukrainians will be able to time their counteroffensive properly and take advantage of the good weather that they have in the fall while they still have it.
I would like to mention before we close this program that a great help continues to come to Ukraine, specifically from Scandinavian countries, specifically from Sweden. UK is sending its military warplanes to Poland to take care of this upcoming drone attacks. I believe that the one that happened last week was not the last one. There will be many more and much more intense. Now there is one unnamed US company is helping creation of artificial intelligence drones, armies, and the Ukraine will get only this year, 2025, 33,000 of those AI drones, and they will.
Now that's going to be very impressive.
It's never been tried in the war. That's why Ukraine is a perfect place where you can see what they're good for and how good they are. You'll find out real soon.
Why not? Yeah.
And Russians, I think Russians would have to be paid for participating in experiments.
What do we get out of this? You get military defeat. That's what you get out of it.
Yeah, so it will be like, sometimes the bees attacking by a huge number of like hundreds of thousands and so on. And here was going to be 33,000 of AI. And they act, from what I heard, they're acting independently from the real life operators. They themselves choose maneuvers, whom to hit, and where to fly, and so on. So it will be very interesting.
I mean, for the Russians, that greatly complicates. Now the Russians, as you know, have what they call radioelektronnaya borba, radioelectronic combat, and they have that, and that involved being able to they use their signals intelligence to look for the command and control nodes, and then they had to decide, okay, do we listen to them? Do we monitor those sources? Do we jam them to interfere with them, or do we use firepower to destroy those particular nodes? They had basically three choices. But now when you have AI drones, there's no command and control system to strike. You have a whole bunch of it's like, as you said, it's like trying to attack a swarm of bees. And you might kill one bee or selected bees, but that swarm is going to overwhelm you, particularly if they are, as you say, intelligent and being able to discern what targets to go after. It has the potential to be almost a war-winning tactic and development.
So actually, if there will be many more drones like that, let's see, not 33,000, but 333,000, and some of the drones will be heavy drones, well equipped with the flying times, like they could fly maybe hours and hours. Who
Right.
knows? Some of these drones could be directed towards Red Square in Moscow.
Yeah, exactly. That would increase the effectiveness of Ukraine's offensive against Russia's war machine, and that development has the potential to choke off Russia's ability to sustain its war effort. So I would say that is a very, very positive development with great
Up-
potential for bringing military victory to Ukraine, which I applaud.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for today's program. We'll see you on Friday, same place, same time. And in the meantime, Slava Ukraini.
God bless America.
Героям слава. Thank you.
God
Bye-bye.
bless Canada and City of Toronto. And see you and have a great week. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.